Hi everybody, welcome back to HighByte. I'm Tom, this is Zero to Pipeline, and today we're going to get into two new topics. We're going to go into one more pipeline tool that you can use, state variables, and then we're going to look at our conditions module. So let's not waste any time and jump into it.
Okay, everybody, here we are. We're back in Intelligence Hub. We're at the login screen. Let's go ahead and log in. And I'm going to go ahead and start a new pipeline because what I want to show you is the state variable function of pipelines. Now, what are state variables? Now, there may be times where you want some context to be retained in a pipeline between the last time you ran it and this time, right? So maybe you're watching a directory and you're watching the files in it and you want to compare what's happening, like what's in this directory right now versus what was in it last time I pulled this location, right? So the way we can do that is by creating state variables. And there's a menu up here that's we're gonna look at in just a minute that will display those state variables for us. But this lets us save context from one variable or from one run of a pipeline to the next. So I'm going to go ahead and take my transform. I'm going to call this transform get because we got two functions that we can use with state variables. I can do, let's see, where was it? It is state.pipeline.get, right? Where I can say get my state variable and state.pipeline.set, where I can set my state to some value, right? So that's how I'm going to read values into and out, or out of the state storage and back into it. And here I'm probably going to do like let my var is equal to in order to work on that information. So I don't need this part right now, but I'm going to get rid of that. Now right now, this variable, my state, doesn't exist. If it did, it would be up here and we'd be able to look at it. You can see there's nothing here. So I need some way to say, like, if I try and read that right now, I'm going to get nothing, right? So I need some way to say, what do I do if nothing? Now, probably the easiest way to do this is to put these two little vertical bars here. These mean or. So if this exists, give it to me, or give me 5. And I picked 5 because what I want to do here is make a pipeline that will output a number decreasing from 5 and then reset, right? So I need to know what the previous value was so I can decrease it a little bit and then reset it at some point. All right, so I've got this starting out at 5. And then I'm going to have the output be my var, right? So we've read this value into this variable, and now we're going to output that same value. So let's save that. Let's wire this guy up, save it again, and let's just make sure that that worked. Right, there's 5. Great. Okay, so that is how I get things out of state variable, and we're going to see that being useful here in just a second, I promise. But now how am I gonna put that back in? All right, so let's get another transform. Let's see, let's call this reduce. And say we're outputting some value here based on what we read from that state variable. Let's put this in. Let's just decrease this event.value minus equals, which just means like this is how much we're going to reduce it by math.random. All right, so we'll reduce it by some random value between 0 and 1. And let's go ahead and just make sure that's working. Save, run. There we go. So this isn't going to be stateful yet. I'm just going to check that this is landing at something between 4 and 5. Perfect. All right. And now what I need to do is write this value back up into the state. So let's grab another transform. We're always going to interact with state variables through transforms. That may change in the future, but for right now, that's what we have. Set. And I'm going to write in here state, nope, lowercase, state.pipeline.set, and it's going to be, I called it my state, and it's going to be, nope, almost, coming in from event.value. Perfect. And I'm not actually affecting how that message passes through here. We'll just save there, and let's check it out a couple times. Now you can see I'm always getting the same value, but I think that is because when I'm in debug mode, we're not going to be able to affect our state variables. So let me get out of here. And instead, I'm going to grab write stage IO, write new, perfect. We're going to go ahead and connect this guy to MQTT. Right, so we're going to use our MQTT connection, state variables, state vars, that'll be fine. And we're going to go ahead and plop a pulled trigger right there. Let's turn that guy on, open up our UNS client so we can catch it, connect, and save. All right. There's all our pumps. And we can see slowly this is ticking down. Every time it processes, it subtracts a random number, writes it back to state, and then picks it up again in the next pass, right? So we've got this now going down infinitely. Not quite what I want. I would like it to reset if it gets to be less than 0. So let me go back to my pipeline. Let me turn that off for the moment. All right, so we are reducing the value. Let me see. If it is, let's cut this line here. These guys were okay. Stages. Let's do a control stage. Let's do a switch, right? And so the switch stage works by evaluating from top to bottom. So greater than 0 or less than 0. Now, essentially, you can see I've got two kind of output nodes here that now correspond to the description I just wrote in there. If this, we're going to start at the top. If this expression value is to true, my message is going to go at the associated node, all right? If it doesn't, we're going to go on to the next one. If that value is to true, we're going to go out that node. If it doesn't, we're going to go on. We could add more. You can see, and like we can keep going down here, adding more and more branches. I only need 2 because all I'm concerned about is my value, is event.value greater than 0, right? And so if that's true, if we're greater than 0, we're just going to go ahead through, right? We're not that worried about it. If we're not greater than 0, do one more transform stage. I'm going to set it back to 5. So if we ever dip below 0, we're actually just going to go back to 5. Bonk, bonk, and we should be right back in line. Okay, so I've just actually made a pretty capable, if not terribly exciting, pipeline here. Let's save that. Oh, let's turn it on first. And let's go check it out in the UNS client. See, we're ticking down, down, down. Oh, and there it goes back up to 5. We want to sit here for another pass of it. Yeah, we only got a couple seconds left. You can see it's going down. And now I'm getting very small. Okay, so that's working about how we expect. All right, and so then we can see if we come up here in state, if I press refresh, you can see now I've got, oh yeah, there's my state and there's the current value. If I refresh this, I'll see it change again because this is constantly ticking through. So this is a way I can, between runs of my pipeline, store the previous value and then use it in the next round. Obviously, I don't have to use it every time. If I store it and then have some branches which want to evaluate the previous setting or maybe write it back only under certain conditions, I can do that. So yeah, it's state.pipeline.set and state.pipeline.get will get your data into these state variables, and I'm sure you can find some flexible use for that. All right, so I wanted to make that before we switch gears and go over to look at conditions. Now, I've got this output to MQTT. I'm going to go ahead and make an input to it real quick because we need an input to write into a condition. So let me go to my connections. I go to my internal MQTT, inputs, and I've got a few different things going on here, but I'll just say new input. I'll call this my state 5. Can I do that? Yes, I can. All right. And then topic, it was under state vars. Create test input. Perfect. All right. So now we're reading that in. All right, let's go to our conditions, shall we? And we're going to make a new condition. Now, conditions are sort of an old module. This is how we can sort of filter or affect an input, add another layer between our input and our direct value. Now, a lot of what you could do in conditions, we didn't used to have pipelines, but now you can do a lot of this in pipelines, but you still have the opportunity to do this in conditions, and you still might want to use this if you're like putting something into a template, for instance. So I'm going to show you how to do it, and you may not end up using this. That's okay. Feel free to lean into pipelines. That's the direction we're going. Let's go ahead and make a new condition to begin with. And let's do, I'm going to give it a little bit away, but I'm going to call this condition ag. And we're going to go ahead next. Now, the reason I chose ag is because we have 4 different types of conditions. We have aggregates, alarms, customs, and deadbands. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select aggregates to start with. And you can see we got a few different things here. First, we need a source. So I'm going to say input. There's my internal MQTT, and there's my state5, right? So this is our data source. And we've got some options here. We've got a scan interval, a storage interval, a window type, and a window interval. Now, what we're interested in, the scan interval is how often this is going to update. I'm going to only set this to be like, I only want to look at the past like 3 seconds. Our aggregate is going to look over some period of time and say like, here is some statistic of the values that happened over this period of time. And I want the statistic over the last 3 seconds, not 3 minutes, 3 seconds. The storage interval is kind of how long that data is going to be cached for. So you want this to be at least longer than your window interval. And, you know, really, it could be pretty much the same thing. If you think you're ever going to change this, maybe you want a storage interval that's longer than your window interval. It's a little bit up to you. I'll just go ahead and make it 1 minute. Scan interval at 1 second, so you get a new value every 1 second. That's fine. And for us, we're going to look at the window type. You got sliding and fixed. Now, fixed, you're really going to have to like have some value that you can calculate as a start timestamp and an end timestamp in your payload. We're not going to do that very often, though you could imagine like you might have that if you have some event that has a start time and an end time, and you can calculate something off of it, and you were able to put it in here into an aggregate. I suppose that's possible. But for our case, for the most part, we're going to use a sliding, which is just to say like I've got this 3 second window and it's sliding along with my real time, right? So as I go forward, I will have always updating over the most previous three values here. Let's go ahead and create that. Save. Oh, did I not? Yeah, okay, great. Oh, and we'll have to enable it too. Right. Oh, perfect. And now you can see I can't press test condition immediately. I will have to check a source because there's lots of statistics we can do on an aggregate. The most immediate that you probably think of is the average. And I think I already said that. That is the average value or the average of those 3 values, right, over the sliding window. But those aren't the only options. You can do the change, the number of values. You know, you got like sort of how many, maybe not creating an entry every time. So how many are in that window? You know, what's the max, the minimum, and just like what are all the values themselves. For the most part, I think we're probably going to use average. So let's go ahead and grab that guy and we'll test this condition. There you go. You can see that's the average over the last 3 seconds. And so it's kind of going to follow a similar pattern, be a tighter window. All right, neat. What else we got? Let's go back to conditions, new condition. All right, let's call this one condition alarm. Great. Next, this one's going to be an alarm. And so the alarm is actually not going to be a high-low. This is going to be really just telling you whether or not you've got a value for a period. So if you have some situation where you're not sure if, you know, or like it could be bad if something disconnected, or if some sensor is temperamental and doesn't report values on a regular basis, or occasionally knocks out, and we didn't know about that, we might want, ooh, can I not grab this guy? There we go. To know, like, give me an alarm if we don't get a value every 10 seconds, right? There's not a whole lot to configure this. This is sort of our fallback, and you might use this to send a message to some other system that could send you a notification or could post this on a dashboard, something like that. So not a whole lot to look into here, but this is how you might generate a message if you get no data for some amount of time. All right, next I had custom. Okay, custom conditions. Hold on. Are just JavaScript. They're sort of like the transform stage of the conditions. I could do basically any math on what I've got here, and then, or like any logic based on what my input is, and return some completely customized message. Total freedom here. I'm not even really sure what I might want to pick. I'm just going to say I think I just used this. Times 2. Oh gosh, I got to remember how that works. This dot. I don't think that's right. Nuts. All right, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and consult the user guide. Remember I said we don't use conditions very often anymore, and I have forgotten how this works. So let's go ahead. Conditions, custom. This dot, oh, that's right. So this is an interesting thing. You can also reference a little bit of context, a little bit of statefulness in these as well, because you might want the current value. You might also want the last value. Now, something to keep in mind here is that in this expression block, we do not use the return keyword. So in previous cases, we were using return, right? And then our expression. And so if I want to go ahead and save and test that condition, I'm going to get this error. What we're going to be using in this case is actually called this implied return in this expression engine. So if I just write some expression here, so this.current value, which is sort of the current value here, we have a couple other options if you want to get the previous value or some other, offsets of statefulness. You can grab those using the syntax from the user guide. I'm here in the configuration condition custom section. But by using the implied return, we can just imagine that there's going to be a return statement over the last thing. So when we put our last variable name, that is what is going to be returned. So I can still do some let scalar equal 14, right? I can still do some JavaScript here. But whatever the evaluation of my last statement is what is going to be output, right? So there, oh, now we broke it. It worked once. Oh, I see. Okay, so this is there's also statefulness because this is going to be remembering one situation to another. If I went ahead and removed that let, I can get what I'm expecting. And that is because every run of this condition, because we can use the previous context, right? Because we can use the last value, is going to remember. So when I had let, it was like, oh, you already defined this. So something to be aware of. But yeah, I can do some multiplication here. I can do a little bit of expression working in order to manipulate the message here into something that's more useful to me. All right. Custom conditions, a little complicated. Maybe you'd prefer a transform stage in your pipeline, but let's go ahead and look at the last one. New condition, deadband. There we go. And we're going to grab deadband condition. Let's grab my input. Perfect. And this is very simple. This is just going to say, don't give me a value if the change is less than this. This is my deadband. So if you've got some noisy sensor, but it's like, I don't know, maybe it bounces around a value of 0.1 all the time, but it only really means anything. The precision is only good to 10 or more. So you might just go ahead and put a 0.1 in there. Maybe I'm going to put a 0.5 just to see if we can observe that. If I go ahead and put that 0.5 absolute deadband and I select here, we should not see a change in this that isn't greater than 0.5. Right? So this might be a way you quiet down the noise of your sensors, of your inputs. Maybe you'll find this useful. Maybe you want that noise and you want to process it in another way. It's up to you. But conditions are a nice little way you can filter some inputs if you have to. If you wanted a little layer just to manage something in between, if I go ahead to my instances, I'll just grab a new simple instance. Simpler instance. You can see when I grab this guy and I want to make it a reference, my conditions are one of my input options, and then there are the 4 conditions that I made. So I can go ahead and grab my aggregate and get you see I sort of stuffed the version in there, that one input, and then it made me all the statistics. And grab that. Oh, wait, I didn't want the default value. Get out of there. Reference. Perfect, right? So we could do that. There's my deadband. Maybe I want to grab that one. So conditions become inputs for instances. And that is probably where you're going to find the most use for it. Although, if you find another useful way to use it, I won't stop you.
All right. Thanks for joining me on state variables and conditions, guys. I hope you learned something, and I hope this is helpful. Maybe you'll find some way to employ these concepts and bring you onto your next pipeline. In our next videos, we're going to start looking at some of the deeper configurations. We're going to go a little bit into the user menu and see if we can get started looking at this data as an API endpoint, because that's one of the really cool things about Intelligence Hub is that we can expose a lot of endpoints and a lot of this information as an API. So we'll see you in the next one. I'm looking forward to it.